Hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie and this is my home studio. I am the Everyday Sewist because I really do sew every day. I have lots of projects in the works, lots of things going on, and I hope that you'll find it fun to see what goes on here. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, my handle is stbrokaw. And of course, you're here on YouTube. And so I hope that you'll like and subscribe and join me when I can post new videos. At the moment, I'm just planning on sharing my works in progress, my recent finishes, and sometimes I'll have a technique or two to share with you. I've been sewing and quilting for about 25 years now, and I've been long arming for about 15 of those years. So I hopefully will have some experiences that I can share with you, and that'll be fun for you to see. I got a couple things finished in February, and one of them is this quilt hanging behind me. The official name of it is called County Clare, and it is the Leader Ender project from Bonnie Hunter at quiltville.com. I'm going to call mine sea glass because it kind of reminds me, the colors of it remind me of sea glass. Her block is a 6-inch block, and the instructions are free on her website. My blocks finish it at 12 inches. I just thought that the 12-inch size would be a little bit easier to sew, give me a little bit faster finish. But keep in mind that when you increase the size of the blocks, you may have fewer design opportunities to lay those blocks out in different ways. But I do like the way this came out. For this quilt, I made a total of 80 blocks. There are 9 rows with 8 blocks in each row. I had 8 extra blocks, which I put into the back of the quilt, and the quilt finishes at 96 by 108. So it's a pretty good size. For the backing on this, I actually, even though I used a 108-inch wide backing, I did piece the backing because I wanted to use those extra blocks right away. So now that you've had a little bit of a chance to look at the front of it, I'm going to flip it around and show you the back of the quilt. All right, be right back. So what I did to make the back of this quilt is I cut it about 2/3 of the way in and put those, made a row of those extra blocks, pieced that into the backing. Because I wanted a vertical row, it actually gave me a lot more length than I needed, or width than I needed. So I cut some of the width off and use that to add the extra length that I needed. Because if your quilt top is 108 inches, your backing needs to be about 118 inches, somewhere around there. So that's how I took a 108 by 108 piece of the pre-cut 3-yard extra wide backing and made that big enough to use on this quilt. Oh, I also wanted to add on this quilt. This quilt has, I used Quilter's Dream Select batting in it. The quilting design is called Feather Wave. It's by Christy Dillon. And I just used a cream colored thread for this, and I quilted it on my handy quilter. I have a Fusion handy quilter model with a pro stitcher, which means it's computer guided. So let me get the next one ready for you. This next quilt that I finished is a string quilt. And a string quilt is made with lots and lots of strings, long skinny pieces of fabric that I had left over from other things. You can see that I used all the colors in it, and I used a white sashing down as a center strip down each of the blocks in order to give it this lattice look. The instructions were free on Emily Dennis's website. Her website is quiltylove.com. It was my New Year's Day start in 2023, so it was a while in the making. I made 63 blocks for this quilt. They are 8-inch finished. There are 9 rows with 7 blocks per row. It finishes at 56 by 72, and it's a really good throw size piece. There are 658 strings in this quilt. And for the backing, I used an extra piece that I had on hand of a K facet extra wide. So I thought that would be a really nice surprise on the back of the quilt. So I think that's kind of fun. Let me get it turned around for you. Isn't that a fun backing? I love it. It's a K facet. It's a piece of extra wide backing that I had. I really don't know the name of it. Maybe it's Big Blooms or something like that. I don't really know. But it was, I thought it would be a nice surprise on the back of the quilt. I'm going to bring this up close for you so that you can see the quilting design a little bit better on this. The quilting design on this one is called Thread Garden, and it's by Jess Ziegler for the Long Arm League. It came out, I just love this design so much, I'm going to be using it again. There's one other thing I want to show you if I can find it here. I started signing my quilts, and I'm not really good about labeling my quilts, but I did find that I could sign my name, and here it is. So what I did is before I took it off the long arm, you can barely see it in there, but I now will write my name in any kind of open space that I have. So that's my hack for getting my quilts labeled. And this one is one I'm keeping, so it's okay for me to have it on there myself. Okay. So one of my other finishes that I have for you today is this sweet floral quilt. I'm going to call it Garden Boxes because that's what it looks like to me. But the official name of it is River Queen, and it's by Villa Rosa Designs. I started it on February 12th this past month, and I had it quilted by February 25th. I still have to turn the binding to the back and hand stitch it down, but that'll get done in the next week or so, so I'm going to call it a finish. And I do usually work on the binding right away. I do not like to have things piling up and waiting to be bound. I just don't do that. I know that happens with a lot of people, but when I get this close to getting it done, I want to get that binding done. I want to be able to use the quilt. So after getting some of those other projects done, the string quilt and County Clare, and one of the other January finishes, those were pretty intense for me. So I pulled out a fat quarter bundle that I wanted to use, and thought that this would just be a really fun one to sew, nice and simple sewing. And it worked out for me just perfectly. Like I said, I could get it cut and get it sewn together and get it almost done in 2 weeks' time, which for me is really good. So the pattern calls for 12 fat quarters. I ended up cutting up 15 fat quarters and using 13 of them. So I kind of like having a little extra variety in there. And then because I added the border, it ends up being a twin size quilt. It's 74 by 94. And I think that one also came out really great. So I'm going to leave that up there for you. And I have another little finish to share with you. Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. So this is my last finish for February. I worked on these cute little bags. That was part of my plan that I told you about last time, and I actually got a couple of them done. So here's one. Made with some cotton and steel fabrics. And then this one. Made with some Moda fabrics. And I'll tell you, it's I have a couple friends who are really, really good bag makers, project bag makers, tote bags, anything, you name it, and they can make it. It is surprisingly hard to sew a straight line, to sew in a zipper, or to do some top stitching. And I've always known that they're really, really talented. But it's going to take some practice for me to get these a little bit better. But they were fun to make, and the instructions were pretty good. And I think I'd like to try to do a couple of more, because it certainly was a skill builder for me, because they're far from perfect. So those are my finishes for February. And then I have a few works in progress that I thought I would show you. So one is, I think you may remember that I said I was making a temperature quilt, and I have January and February all done and put together. So would you like to see it? Let me step back here. So if I get out of the way, can you see this? So what I've decided to do is at the end of, in the blank ones, I've got a nice dark navy blue that I'm going to use, that I think will be the border as well, and it'll frame it. And so I'm still keeping up with my temperature quilt, and it's kind of interesting. So we'll just keep going with that. I've been continuing to make more potato chip blocks. So I keep adding to my pile. I started the month with 13, and now I have 19. So I'm getting there. Little by little, I'm getting there. And I want to have 30 blocks for this quilt. So it's coming along. May take a while, but it's coming along, and that's fine. They're fun to do. And I keep cutting up scraps. It gives me a purpose and a size and a reason for how to cut up my leftover border strips, leftover binding strips, leftover backings are all getting cut up into this size. I'm using a 2.5 by 4.5 inch cut rectangle. And actually, when I get done with these, I may like to try doing a smaller size as well, but I haven't really decided, and I don't need to decide yet. So I'm keeping up with those, the potato chip block. The other thing that I showed you last time and I started is a Stash Buster quilt pattern by Border Creek Station Company. And now I have 9 blocks sewn into a quilt top. I'm auditioning borders, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do for a border yet, but I'll give you a little peek at my progress on this one. There, I think you can see that a little bit better now. If I get my head out of the way, you can see it. So this is my Stash Buster Challenge quilt from Border Creek Station Company. I decided on making it a 9-block quilt, and I used a Star Wars fabric. That dark background is actually a Star Wars fabric that I can't get any more of. So when I ran out of it, that's why it's 9 blocks. And I'm still trying to figure out the border on this. I may end up carrying that gray fabric out to the border, but we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of in timeout right now while I think about what I want to do with it. The next thing that I pulled out of my UFO bin, I found some blocks, some, what do you call it? Maybe a freestyle log cabin block. So the pieces are not cut and measured, and they're not all the same width or length. So I wanted to try to do a little bit of freestyle piecing on this. So this is what I have so far. I started with 4 blocks and now I have 15. And they've been really, really fun to sew. And I'm using this as my leader ender project currently. Let me hold this up a little better for you. The technique for these log cabin blocks, the way I had seen them done recently was by a woman on Facebook. Her name is Joanne Duckworth. And so many people were making them in this group that someone said, we need to come up with a name for this. So they're called Duckworth quilts. And if you Google that or look for it on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, then you'll find a group where people are making these in all different ways, and they're really fabulous. So my little blocks finish at 5 inches. So right now, this one, since it's not sewn next to its neighbor, this one is 5.5 inches. And when they get finished and sewn into a project, they'll be 5 inches big. I have a whole drawer of blue scraps, and I'm throwing in little bits of other colors for it. I think it's going to be a really fun thing to make. I'm still not sure whether I'm going to make a table runner or if I'll actually get enough to make a whole quilt with it. We'll see. I know I've got enough scraps for it. It's just whether or not I decide that I want to stop at a particular point. Right now, I'm kind of thinking table runner because I'd like to be able to see it up close. And when it's on the table, that's exactly the way you view it. You'd view it up close and be able to look at it all the time and enjoy all the little tiny pieces in it, because some of them are pretty small. So that's the way I'm leaning, and we'll see. I'll keep you posted. I'll show you what happens by this time next month and show you what's been going on with it. The next project that I've been that I pulled out of hibernation, had been sitting on in a tub for many, many years. I think I started it at least 10 years ago. I'm using some Anna Maria Horner fabrics and making 12-inch star blocks. I started with 12 blocks, and let's see. I think I made like 5 this past month. So if I had 30 blocks, that would be big enough for a lap quilt. Just show you a few of them here. Tell you this fabric was from a backing of a quilt that I finished a few months ago. And so I was really happy to be able to pull that out and use some more of that backing because I love that fabric. And here's another one. I think I just had a fat quarter of this one. So altogether, I have about 18 of them. And so that's coming along. And I'm really pleased with them. When I make the star points, I'm using the 4 at a time method for the flying geese. What that means, I can't give the measurements off the top of my head because I'm afraid I'd say it wrong. But if you look up 4 at a time flying geese, and if you haven't tried that method before, you might like it, because I did mine. I specifically looked for the ones that called them oversized, because I felt better about having them oversized and being able to trim them down. And the key with doing any of these, if you do the 4 at a time, is to make sure that you're really using a full 1/4 inch seam allowance. You do not want to make a scant seam allowance, or you'll end up losing the point here, because you won't have a 1/4 of an inch to sew this to the next to the remaining pieces, and you'll lose your point. Give you also a little peek at some of the fabrics that I pulled for this. So it's kind of got a little bit of a fall flavor to it, I think. And so if I can work on it little by little and get it done over the next couple of months, I think that would be perfect. The last of my works in progress, so let's see, so I've got the temperature quilt, the potato chip quilt, I have my stash buster that's sitting right behind me here, I have a binding to do on this one, my stars, and then the last one that I pulled out, this is one of my oldest UFOs. And I don't really know what made me think of it the other day, but I was updating all of my project sheets and saw this, somehow this one just popped out at me. This is from a class I took with my guild members, I think must have been back in like 2006 or 7, long time ago. And the technique is a watercolor technique. And so here it is. All of the squares are laid out in the arrangement that I want. And now what I'm doing is I am just tacking each of the squares down. I mean, they've been in this box or rolled up for so long, I kind of need to press them and get them a little flatter. They're 2-inch squares, and they are on a grid so that the grid gets sewn right along in with the square. So I don't take them off the grid in order to sew it. It's not a fusible. It's I'm not even sure the name of this kind of interfacing, I guess. It's a type of interfacing, like what you'd see in a Mondo bag or something like that. Anyway, I really like it. It reminded me of some of the rivers that we see when we go out to Colorado to visit our son. So I'm really quite liking it, and I think that will become something that I work on over the next couple of months. So the last thing I wanted to share, well, I guess I thought I would share some of my haul with you. So I also wanted to share with you a couple of the things that I'll be working on in March, and a couple of the little things I've purchased recently. I really haven't gotten much at all, but I have a couple of friends who really like making collage quilts. So as part of my try new things and let's see what happens and keep that brain going, I decided I'd like to try a collage quilt. And so I purchased 2 different collages. This one, it's a little squirrel, reminds me of the squirrels that run in our backyard. And this makes an 8-inch finished block, so I thought this would be perfect for testing out the whole idea. And then if I can do that one successfully, I also got this one. which I thought I liked all of those images, so I thought those could be really fun to work on. So those are my big purchases for the last month. Oh, and underwear. Don't forget to buy some fresh underwear every year, so I did that too. So let's see, what am I going to work on in March? Well, first of all, later this week, I'm going down to Bloomington, Indiana. That's the annual quilt show down in Bloomington, held by a guild there. I'm going to go support my guild and work at the raffle quilt table, and also help do some white gloving at that show, and get to spend a little time in Bloomington. We really enjoy that city, so we're looking forward to going to a couple of our favorite restaurants down there, and it'll be a nice little overnight getaway. So that's coming up. The second thing I want to do, I want to finish the binding on this quilt, and that won't take long, especially if I sit in the car for an hour and a half. It'll get me partway around the quilt on that. It's a good travel project to have a binding to do. I want to keep making the star blocks that I showed you. I'd like to see how many of those I could get done in the month, and maybe I think I'd like to try making a couple more of these little pouches, because I definitely need to get better doing that. And before I get on to any project bigger than that, I'd really like to improve my technique on making some of those. Let's see. I have a couple of pillowcases to make. That won't take long. Those are for my guild's charitable work that they do. They provide kits for making pillowcases. So I'll get those whipped up. And the watercolor, I'd like to keep working on that watercolor project. And I also, well, I have a 2-day retreat coming up or 3-day retreat coming up later in the month. So I should be able to make some good progress on some of these if I can get some more cutting done. But I'm pulling out another long time UFO called Long Time Gone. And boy, I don't know, that name is become too appropriate for this project. And I keep trying to pull it out and get it done and keep stalling on it. So I'm hoping that this time I'll really push through and work on it, because I really like it. So the section that I'm working on right now is these little pineapple blocks. So I'll show you one. So these pineapple blocks finish at 5 inches, and there are let's see, 37 pieces in each of these. But they're not hard to do. I've already done one so far this month, and I only need one more of these before I can go on to the next group of blocks, which I think are flying geese. I think there's a couple different sizes of flying geese. So if I can keep making progress on this, it might actually get to the point where I could put it on my design wall, but probably not this month, probably not March, maybe in April. So keep flipping some of these up here. So like I said, they're not hard. I've got all the papers ready for it, but I just need to keep going on it. Lastly, if there's any other time that I want to start something new and work on another fat quarter bundle, because I just really love being able to pull out a fat quarter bundle to work on this quilt, and I'd like to do that again. I ordered a couple other patterns from Villa Rosa Designs, and they should be here any day. So when I get those patterns, I think I'll probably be picking one out and it'll be a simple thing to sew, and I'll get working on that, and maybe that will get done this month as well. We'll see. So that's a wrap for what happened in February, and I am so glad that you came in to join me and see what was going on here. I hope you had fun looking at all these different projects, and I hope that you're making good progress on your projects as well. I'm so glad to have you here and share this with all of you. I hope you are well. I'm sure you're doing the best you can, but I wish you well. And as we are waiting springtime here in the US and warmer temperatures, I hope things are going really well for you. Until next time, happy sewing. Bye-bye.